I call this one Tough Times Ahead, Tough Times Ahead, Famine, and Acts chapter 11. Okay, so there's a big deal happening over in Antioch. It's such a big deal. It's such a big deal that verse 27 says, in these days prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. All right, first let me say, in these days, the verb tenses in the concordant literal New Testament are really alive. In the Greek of the New Testament, there is a verb form called the aorist tense, and we don't have it in English. And the closest we have is a present tense. But the aorist tense is rather timeless. Okay? So I don't know what this verse 27 says in the King James. It might say in those days. But in those days gives you the feeling like this is speaking of the past, of course. But when it says in these days, oh man, there's a timelessness to this thing. Anyway, so I'm making the argument that you should go get yourself a concordant literal New Testament and the concordant Old Testament. They've got it finished finally. It took them 100 years to finish that one. But it's a wonderful literal version of the Bible, and they do a fantastic job with verb forms and verb tenses. Okay, back to the subject at hand. Verse 27 of chapter 11. Now in these days prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. So there was something special happening in Antioch that was not happening in Jerusalem. Prophets are not, they're not that far away from selfishness. And if Antioch was boring and nothing was happening there, they'd stay in Jerusalem where the action is. But Jerusalem is not where the action is anymore. Well, something is happening in Antioch that's not happening in Jerusalem. And I tell you what it is, in a nutshell, in Jerusalem, they had a lot of miracles happening, because they became instant disciples of Christ, and there was quite a bit of action there going on. But I get the feeling by this chapter 11 that things are dying down in Jerusalem and things are becoming more ritualized and formalized, and they're headed toward being like an official church, with rules and regulations and stuffiness and, dress codes and all that crap. Anyway, over in Antioch, it's a little wild. They've got Hellenists over there who are into this Jesus and the resurrection and all that it means. And all that it means. Here's another thing that was happening in Antioch. They were teaching a year's worth of teaching. Saul got there to Antioch just to hear a 1 year's worth of teaching, maybe even be one of the teachers. They weren't dependent on miracles, signs, and action, and unexplainable action. They were into teaching. Anyway, so prophets went down to Antioch. Now get this, verse 28. Now one of them, named Agabus, rising, signifies through the Spirit the great famine which is about to be on the whole earth, the whole inhabited earth, which did occur under Claudius. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about great famines. And I am a bit of a student of history, and I have come to believe that 95% of all famines throughout human history are actually caused by governments. You've heard of the Irish potato famine? They didn't have a lack of potatoes. They had bad British government policy which destroyed the opportunity to grow potatoes. It had something to do with real estate, or how you use real estate, or building houses, or something like this. I forgot. But anyway, the Irish potato famine was actually caused by the British government. And you can see this down throughout history if you study history. Almost all famines are actually and truly caused by bad government policy. Anyway, and if we look at our times here on the earth right now in 2021, it's easy enough to say that uh, easy enough to be an Agabus, a prophet named Agabus, and predict a great famine is coming about the whole earth because the prosperity which we have enjoyed for the last 100 years or so actually is a result of easy credit and easy money, and that seems to be tied to easy access to oil, which gave us cars and airplanes and travel and buildings, and we have a whole universe that was built, a whole little present universe that we see that was built by easy access to oil, and it appears that we're running out of oil. It's not so easy to find. 120 years ago, you could kick over a rock and oil would come out of the ground. Remember that the Clampets, the Beverly Hillbillies? Let me tell you a story about a man named Jed, poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. Then one day he was shooting out some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude. Well, oil was a lot easier to find a long time ago, 100 years ago. That's not very long. 100 years ago, it was very easy to find. And now, if you look at the oil industry, they have to put oil derricks 18 miles out into the ocean, and then dig down really deep. Oil is just not as easy to find. And if we run over the energy cliff, if we don't have easy access to easy oil, then we are not going to have easy times like we've had in the past. Money is not going to be easy, and therefore credit is not going to be easy. And it's easy enough to predict that a great famine is about to be on the whole inhabited earth, which occurred under Claudius. Okay, so if it's easy enough to predict that, now think about how this world that we live in today is run on credit. Trader Joe's, Costco, and Walmart, the managers of those stores call up the vendors and suppliers of peanut butter and socks and beach balls and bikinis. They call them up and they order stuff on credit. Suppose credit disappears, then those vendors and suppliers might one day say, hey, we'll send those to you, but it's cash on delivery. That's going to screw up the entire world as we know it if credit disappears. And I'm telling you, as I see the world, credit and easy access to oil and energy are very much married to each other. Credit and easy money are very much married to easy access to oil. And you can pretty much see that there's evidence that not just that the oil derricks 18 miles out into the ocean, that's proof that we're running out of oil, easy oil. But you look up into the skies right now, there's not that many airplanes flying like there were a year and a half ago. I live on the flight path, and there were 5 planes going, coming into land every 10 minutes a year and a half ago. Now it's 1 plane every 2.5 hours, it seems. Could that be a sign that we're running out of easy oil? Yeah. All right, so this guy named Agabus, he was probably reading the Wall Street Journal, some financial reports. He was probably ahead of his time, and it wasn't just, he woke up one day and out of total ignorance, now he's got all this knowledge. He knew something. He was paying attention to how the world works. And he probably was seeing Claudius mismanage resources and abuse the slaves of the world, which is everybody. Anyway, so how did the church in Antioch deal with the coming famine? The church at Antioch apparently believed Agabus, and verse 29, according as any of the disciples thrived, each of them designated something to send to the brethren dwelling in Judea for dispensing, which they do also, dispatching to the elders through the hands of Barnabas and Saul. So they got it in Antioch. They heard the word of the Lord concerning the coming famine, and they did something about it. They gathered up as much um, goods and money and food and whatever. Each of them designated, uh, each of them according as they thrived. Any of them who thrived, prosperous, they sent a bunch of money and goods down to Judea through the hands to be delivered by the hands of Barnabas and Saul. And get this now, Saul, he's in the position of Stephen. Stephen was doing this just a little while ago, like a year earlier, or 2 years earlier. Stephen was the dispenser of collected goods, and Saul had Stephen killed or was participating in it, and now Saul has taken Stephen's place. Now, isn't that humiliating in a good way? But I don't think Saul saw it as a humiliating thing. He was probably honored to be chosen. By this time he's learned to trust God and not fight God. He's honored to be in this position, and he doesn't look at the situation as punishment. Okay, so are we today headed into a great famine? I'm thinking that there is a economic principle that says every artificial expansion of credit and money is always followed by an equal contraction of credit and money. So I would suggest that we as the church do like what they did in Antioch, is learn to do without and start saving up things so that we can send it to the saints who are in need elsewhere. And we learn to live without easy credit and without easy access to money. And if I'm right about this oil connection, we're going to have to learn to live without easy access to oil also. Anyway, so this is your message from Agabus. Signing off. Leave any comments you want about this thing, because this is current events right here. This is not Jerusalem and Antioch opposing each other. Years of history from 2,000 years ago. Action. It's current events too, because we're not any different. We're not very much different than what was going on in Jerusalem and what was going on in Antioch, and we're not exempt from any great famine which occurred under Claudius. Who's the Claudius of our day? Yeah, just change the name and you've got him. So President Claudius screwed up and caused a great famine. And the church, according as any of the disciples thrived, each of them designated something to send to the brethren dwelling in Judea for dispensing. This is an important work of God, the dispensing. Saving up according as you thrive, and arranging your life so that you can thrive without easy access to credit and easy access to money and easy access to oil. I'm just throwing that oil business in because it's a tie-in that not many people see, but I suspect I see it. Okay, enough thinking for this morning. Grace to you, and do leave any comments, because we can go in a lot of different directions with this discussion today. Tough times ahead, famine, and Acts chapter 11. Okay, see you later.